Hello. Hello. Welcome. This is Love is Awakened. My name is Emma, and here is the surrendered life we're going to speak about today. And because I'm with my fancy setup here, I feel the desire to have a slightly more official stance. Poppy is here with me, barking in the background. Thank you very much, Poppy. So here we are talking about the surrendered life today. And I thought this is a interesting topic and a great topic for a longer video because I have a whole story around my experience of surrendering, truly surrendering, and also what that means. I want to talk about that, and also I know that in non-dual circles, it also becomes this question of, is there anyone to surrender? And my personal perspective on this is really that sometimes we also are way too anal about the words. The most important thing for me is for there to be a recognition and a heart understanding, understanding of these concepts. And of course, surrender is something that we have been exploring and living with for, I'd like to say, thousands of years, if we're looking back to Rumi and Christ and other mystics throughout history. So it truly has a beautiful part of the spiritual experience, and truly a part in the exploration of what we are. And in my personal experience, a great part in what it meant for me to wake up and to integrate the understanding of the truth of what we are into the human life. So the surrendered life. I want to go back to 2017 when I had my first profound shift in consciousness and woke up to the experience of oneness for the first time. That was of course, very defining moment in my life. And following that, I started to become a different person in many ways. The expression that this body mind was taking was changing a lot. And along with that experience of what we might call a awakening or a kundalini rising, can call it by so many different names, also came the experience of my heart awakening, waking up, like really activating, like my heart chakra really activating in my physical body, and it started talking to me. And this was actually the biggest shift that I experienced was my heart literally speaking to me is what it felt like. And it was telling me all of these things that I needed to do. And it really was a needed to do. It wasn't desires that came from my mind. It was literally my soul speaking to me. That is how I experienced it at the time. I would call it different today, and we will get to that. But at the time, it was a very strong experience of being in the mind, but then also having this other piece that was so clearly guiding me into the actions that I needed to take. And I remember saying to my friends and people around me back then, because I was making so many changes and really starting my life over in many, many ways. And I kept saying, I don't feel like I have a choice. Like there wasn't a choice for me to continue life as it was. It was so abundantly clear what I needed to do, and that it was incredibly important that I did take these steps. And so it became like a crash course really in trust, because like I said, I didn't feel like there was any other option than to simply follow what my heart was telling me to do. And of course, it also felt very good. Even though I was taking very difficult decisions, I was grieving a lot, I was losing a lot of safety, sort of physical, material safety in many, many ways. And yet it still felt so good in my whole body to be taking these steps, these actions. And about a year later, when I had been in this experience, I had been in bliss states, my consciousness open, I was receiving so many downloads, and equally I was moving through a very difficult time in maybe even 2 years later. I found myself completely having deconstructed the life that I had had, and I found myself in the space of nothingness and building from the ground up once more. And I was looking back at the past 2 years, and I recognized that I had done all the right things, even though it was painful at the time, being in that space of no safety, no support really. Of course, I had people around me. I'm blessed with having beautiful people around me. But sometimes on this journey, we are also traveling it alone. This journeyless journey, this experience that we're having at many times, especially when we go within, when we are exploring the truth of what we are going to be in spaces where we feel like there is nowhere to turn but inwards. And that can sometimes, before we get used to it, feel lonely. And there I was. And I looked back at the past 2 years. I was seeing the actions that I had taken, the steps that I had made, and I knew I was in the right place. My heart was still talking to me, showing me, making me feel this is right. There is nothing else to do. This is right. And I made the decision there and then to surrender fully to the heart. It was clear to me after those 2 years that I never would have ended up in that place if I hadn't simply listened. My awareness had deepened profoundly, and I knew that I was on the path of my soul, of my true expression, of my true desires that I didn't even know I had had. But there they were, and they were so clear. So I made the decision that no matter what the head says, because I had observed my mind for these past 2 years going, whoa, I don't want to do this. This is scary. This is hard. This is painful. And yet, so I decided there, no matter what my head says, I am going to follow the heart. I'm going to follow my intuition. And that is what I did. Of course, I'd been doing it already for the past 2 years, but at that point I decided, okay, clearly there is a bigger intelligence than my mind at work here. So let me just surrender to it and follow the path that it's laying out for me, one step at a time. So this was now, say, about 6 years ago. So I have been living in this state of surrender for 8 years. It sounds like a long time when I say it out loud. And I don't often think about time anymore. But looking back at that person and the journey that she has taken, that this body-mind has taken, the evolution that has occurred within this being during that time, from a mind-based perspective, just blows it wide open. I could never have imagined back then the expression that this body-mind would be taking now at this moment. Once again, we're now speaking in timelines, and of course, everything is simply just evolving. But as we tell stories, we need to use the timeline that we are mentally experiencing. And of course, this is also a way for us to see evolution, rising and falling, etc. It's another point for another day. And what I have found with this experience of surrender is that when we first decide to surrender, we start leaning into trust. We start leaning into and giving away a little bit of that control, need for control that the mind holds. And we say, okay, let me give this. This is bhakti yoga, it's devotion, right? We are giving ourselves, our small self, to the bigger self. We're giving up the mind to listen to the heart, to be guided by the greater expression. This is a recognition of the oneness that we are. It is a first step in dissolving the experience boundaries that we hold, that we have between ourselves, physical expression, and the rest of the world physical expression, but of course, everything that is. So we begin with that trust. A small step of saying, okay, I'm going to test this and I'm just going to listen and see what happens. And This takes a lot of courage. At the time when I made this conscious decision, truly, I didn't necessarily feel like it was a lot of courage, because once again, my heart was so clear about it. It was like this, yes, you know. I had been given those 2 years of that strong pull that I couldn't really fight, and it has showed me. It had showed me the magic that it was doing to my experience. So when I took that conscious step, even though it did feel scary, it continued to feel scary. Every time an action arose, I was like, really? Should I be doing that? And sometimes there's this pull back and forth before we do take that step, right? But that initial decision to say I'm going to trust is a beautifully courageous step that we take. And it is in the heart that we are connected when we make this decision, because the mind is never going to want to make this decision unless we begin to see that the actions and choices that we have made based on our mind has never brought us happiness. It has not brought us what we thought it was going to give us. Sometimes we can go, okay, I see that this is not working. Let me try something else. And that's another path. That's a more intellectual path to the surrender. For myself, I'm very devotional, very heart-led. It's all fine. And these are two beautiful explorations. One, the heart one's very based in experience, and whereas the intellectual one, more based in exploration, in asking, in being critical about our own experience, and really seeing things for what they are. Once again, that's another conversation for another time. But we can come to this decision from different angles. No matter where we come from, at some point we need to decide, I'm going to trust and I'm going to take that leap. And I'm going to see what happens when life takes the lead. And we begin with the actions in the physical world, the actions that are very connected to our personal self. If we are not in the understanding of oneness and what we are, we're going to be acting from the place of the separate self, and that's fine. It's what it is. But the step to surrender is one of the first steps that we can take in order to open up to the experience of non-duality, of oneness. And we begin to take the actions. Perhaps we change our jobs. Perhaps we move. Perhaps we break up that relationship, or we say that thing out loud that we've been afraid of saying. So many different ways that we can be guided by the heart into new decisions in our lives. And most likely they are going to feel scary, and they're also going to feel exciting. Because when we are guided by the heart, when we're guided by our intuition, there is always going to be a strand of excitement there. Sometimes we're called into experiences and actions that truly we know are going to be challenging for the separate self experience. the mind. It's going to trigger wounds or fears. But equally, we feel within the heart that little light of excitement. And here's the beautiful thing. Many spiritual teachers, all different kinds of people speak about the trail of excitement. And this is it. When we take a step into a surrendered life, we begin to put the self to the side. We're beginning to put the mind to the side, and we're starting to listen to our hearts. We're starting to listen to the excitement that lives within our hearts. And then here's the beautiful thing. This is one of the first things that I really recognized with this experience. I was like, damn, my heart always knows the way. You know, it's like, it's one of those things like we've been told our whole lives, right? It's like, follow your heart. And everyone's like, oh my God, it's so cliche, you know? But here it is. And it's such a profound truth. Who could have known? It is such a profound truth because the heart always leads us forward when we follow the excitement of the heart. And the mind is going to argue. It is going to oppose some of these experiences. And then when it sees the result in hindsight, it's going to go, oh my God, I could never have imagined. And then over time, you learn, you're starting to see, right? It's like, I see what the mind is saying, but I can feel so strongly what my heart is saying. I'm going to do it, and you just go for it. And the mind becomes more and more quiet. It silences down and it silences down. Because there is now starting to be a higher awareness that is taking the lead, that is taking the main stage in your experience. And here's the beautiful thing. This is you, right? This is the true awareness. Sometimes we speak about the soul, right? And the soul, in my perspective, is simply a piece of the localized consciousness. But the soul is it's like the key, the pathway into the infinite knowing of what we are. The soul lives in the heart. The soul is like whispering to us, right? It's like that's the one that is guiding until the point where we begin to deepen and deepen and deepen into the true awareness that we are. The soul doesn't go like the soul. It's like, to me, it's like the mixture of the infinite one impersonal being and this localized expression of the infinite impersonal being that becomes what we might call personal. It has its individual desires, right? It has its individual way of expressing and being and exploring and experiencing the world. And there is where like the soul kind of like clicks in my perspective. This is how I don't think about the soul too often, but that is how I would perhaps describe it, because I just did. So as we continue, the mind begins to silence and we can feel the force of the one being more and more clearly within this localized experience here. And the heart is the portal. And the more that we follow, so this is where it's like that I guess, perceived surrender, right? It's a surrender of the mind. The mind is the one that surrenders because you believe to be the mind. There is an experience of I am surrendering to something. Of course, the more that we attune to the truth of what we are, we begin to see more and more that that is not what I am. I'm not the mind. So there wasn't ever anyone to surrender, right? So here's where we kind of get into that like non-dual thing. But before we get to that point, it's still going to feel like we are surrendering. Because the mind hasn't silenced down enough yet that we are truly seeing, boom, this is what I am. And I have had experiences where it hurts. You know, I continue to follow my heart. I continue to follow my heart. And I've come to points twice in the past where there is this really profound sense of deep call of surrendering. And it hurts. And it feels like dying. It hurts. And each time I have been in this I don't want to do it. I want to do it, but I don't want to do it. And of course, ultimately, I was like, well, there is nothing else to do. Let me die. Let me die. And I gave up. And each time, there was a deeper layer of the non-dual experience that opened to me. This happened to me twice. The first time, it opened me up to... Well, here's the thing. It becomes weird at this point to say it opened me up because it laid the foundation, the ground, the fertile soil for the identification of self to finally fall away. And and my experience became non-dual. Following this struggle in surrender and feeling in the mind as if I was like, I have to let go, and it feels like dying and it hurts. And I did. The mind, whoosh, the mind went even more silent. And this laid the foundation for the non-dual experience to really lock in here into this experience where I came, where there came a point where the experience became complete. There is nothing more to search for. So this is what many people call the true sort of awakening, the non-dual understanding dropping in. And then after that experience, in the deepening, even deeper stages of awakening, I had a second wave of this type of surrender. We'll speak about this another time because it's a little bit off topic. But it was still it was the last fragments of self clinging on. And this time, it really felt like dying. And it's not necessarily comfortable, but let's speak about that another time because this is quite far ahead. And if you are in that experience, drop a comment, ask your questions. I'm happy to talk about this as well. But because we are talking about the surrendered life today, this is just to give you an overview of this, the sort of apparent pieces. And this can look so different, right, for everyone. Different pieces, the different opportunities for the mind to let go. And for the trust and open-heartedness to take its place. And once again, it starts with that one step of trust. Okay, maybe I'll trust the heart, right? And we continue to go on this journey of allowing life to evolve itself around us. And we're able to let go and let go and let go of ownership to our actions. And it's a beautiful journey of watching the conditioned self fall away, where we get to experience the parts of the wounded self arising. We get to witness those parts and see how the stories that they're telling are just not real. And that there is something greater beyond them. And that is what we continue to lean into, the heart. The trust, the knowing, the expansiveness of what we are. And the surrender becomes itself. We become surrendered, if you like, or rather we become being. And this is how we move into the Tao, how we move into, or how rather the Tao arises through this being. Because there is no mind to be fighting with the will of all. The true will. And here's the thing. The true will of all is the true will of our hearts. It's always going to be the same. And this is from where the Tao moves. The flow of life moves. And we become, once again, a more integrated part of the whole. Because we are a piece of the whole. And here's the beautiful thing. The beautiful thing that the part before, the part where we are resisting and fighting and having the experience of being a separate self, that's also part of the whole. There are no wrongs here. There's nothing to blame. There's nothing to be like, that's the bad part of my life and this is the good part of my life. No, we're just following the desire to know. We're just following the desire to be truth, to be happiness. And when we start to wake up and we recognize, I was looking for it because it is what I am. I was always looking for me. I was looking for who I am. I was looking for truth. I was looking for happiness. I was looking for love. Here it is. That's why I was looking for it, so that I could find my way back to myself. And when we get to that point is when we can begin to follow that true purpose, the true desire to live a fulfilled life. And we are completely surrendered from the perspective of the mind. But truly, we are just moving in oneness, in joy, in freedom. If you have been with me throughout this exploration, I hope that this has landed in your heart and that you can integrate, recognize yourself. I ask you to like this video, like and comment on this video. Subscribe if you haven't, so that I can continue to share these teachings, this perspective, this love with you. I would love to hear your questions. And if you want to receive more teachings, more direct interaction with me for deeper learning, deeper opening, greater freedom and liberation, I also have a Patreon community where you can connect, and there is a link in the description for that. And this is the reason why I'm here. The surrendered life is the reason I am on YouTube. YouTube and all of these other platforms. It has been a guidance of my purpose, my heart, the joy that I feel in exploring truth and sharing my findings with other human beings so that we can live and rise together. This is our purpose. This is our combined whole purpose: to live in joy, to live in freedom, to live in love. There are no limits to what we are capable of. Blessings in truth, blessings in love. Thank you. Bye.